Note, the following reconstruction is based on open-source intelligence, strategic analysis, and military simulations. Operational secrecy limits the availability of exact details. It started under the cover of absolute silence. At precisely 0001 hours Eastern Daylight Time, 7B-2 Spirit stealth bombers lifted off from Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri. Each aircraft, black as the void, vanished into the night sky with no fanfare, no headlines, and no chatter on open military frequencies. The mission was already in motion long before the world would even suspect it. These aircraft weren't just flying machines. They were flying ghosts, products of billions of dollars, decades of research, and engineering secrecy so tight it bordered on science fiction. Designed during the Cold War to infiltrate the Soviet Union, the B-2 is still considered the most advanced stealth bomber in operation. It can slip past radar networks, regulate its infrared signature, and disappear into the curvature of the Earth. No enemy radar system in the world has ever reliably tracked a B-2 in real time. But this night, the target wasn't Moscow. It was Iran. Specifically, deeply buried nuclear facilities that had become the centerpieces of Tehran's atomic ambitions, Fordow and Natanz. Both sites were heavily reinforced, buried beneath mountains of rock, and designed to withstand conventional airstrikes. But the US wasn't planning to use conventional tactics. Each B-2 carried 2 GBU-57A Massive Ordnance Penetrator, MOP, bombs, 30,000-pound bunker busters engineered to do one thing: crush what lies beneath. These weren't just bombs, they were precision-guided earth-drilling weapons capable of slicing through concrete and granite alike. The world had been watching Iran's nuclear program creep forward for years, through UN reports, satellite photos, and diplomatic warnings. But no one expected this level of surgical devastation. The mission was not just a warning. It was a statement. And it was a gamble the US military could not afford to lose. While 6 bombers pushed east, a decoy formation peeled west toward Guam. This was no mistake, it was a classic misdirection maneuver, designed to confuse satellite watchers, adversarial radar operators, and foreign military analysts. The US wasn't just flying, it was playing geopolitical chess at 40,000 feet. As the B-2 split up, their intentions remained invisible to nearly every defense network in the region. A small circle inside the Pentagon, NORAD, and CENTCOM held their breath. The operation had no room for error. Speech balloon before we reveal how this elite mission unfolded over 5 continents. Subscribe to the channel for more real-time breakdowns of global power plays, military secrets, and unfiltered truth that mainstream media won't show you. The countdown had begun. And once the bombs dropped, nothing would ever be the same. Thousands of feet above the Atlantic Ocean, 7 invisible war machines pushed eastward under the veil of complete radio silence. The world beneath them bustled with life, commerce, and routine, entirely unaware of the devastating power overhead, moving with intent toward a flashpoint in the Middle East. This wasn't just a strike, it was the most complex long-distance stealth operation the US had conducted in 3 decades. The flight path was anything but direct. Each segment of the mission was engineered with clockwork precision to avoid radar zones, satellite detection, and political fallout. America wasn't just sending bombers, it was threading a billion-dollar needle through the eyes of global surveillance. The B-2 stealth wasn't just skin deep. Every flight detail, from altitude modulation to engine thermal output, had been calculated to remain below the detection thresholds of even the most advanced foreign tracking systems. But stealth has a cost, and that cost is fuel. Within hours of departure, the bombers met up with their first in-air refueling over the North Atlantic, off the coast of Newfoundland. They were joined not by 1 or 2 tankers, but by an entire shell game of aircraft flying divergent paths, east, west, and south, all designed to create radar clutter and satellite confusion. This wasn't just deception, it was multi-layered disinformation warfare. While American aircraft were slipping past European air corridors, Russian and Chinese satellites scrambled to identify patterns. But every time they thought they'd found the bombers, they were looking at shadows, decoys, tankers, and false heat signatures bleeding across the sky. Hours later, as dawn broke over Europe, the operation grew even more delicate. U.S. Air Force tankers stationed in Europe rendezvoused with the strike group over the Mediterranean Sea, just off the coast of Italy. Meanwhile, additional tanker aircraft flew decoy routes toward Spain, the Balkans, and even southern France. It was all noise, designed to drown the real signal. The bombers banked southeast. Their next challenge wasn't radar, it was politics. To reach Iran, the formation would have to skirt or pass through the airspace of nations with unpredictable loyalties. Turkey, a NATO ally with growing ties to Russia, could not be trusted with forewarning. Iraq was informed only moments before overflight. Saudi Arabia, however, had been thoroughly briefed. They offered airspace, coordination, and forward-deployed refueling assets. Every second of the flight carried risk. One radar lock, one broken transmission, or one tanker failure could blow the operation wide open. And the stakes weren't just diplomatic. A down B-2 would be a goldmine of American aerospace secrets, one that adversaries would exploit for decades. At this point, the mission had spanned over 20,000 kilometers across the globe, using technology few civilians could comprehend and tactics honed through years of silent rehearsal. But all this complexity was in service of one singular goal: putting 2 bunker-busting bombs exactly where they needed to go. Not near the target. Not close. But dead center, within meters. And now, the strike package was entering the most dangerous airspace on Earth. At 1700 hours Eastern Daylight Time, the sky above the Persian Gulf transformed. Out of the blue, a formation unlike any seen since the opening hours of Desert Storm came together in deadly harmony. From different directions, squadrons of American aircraft formed up into a massive aerial spearhead, quietly racing toward one of the most fortified airspaces in the world. The B-2s had been joined by the elite F-22 Raptors, F-35 Lightning IIs, F-15 Strike Eagles, and Navy F-18 Super Hornets. This was more than an escort mission. This was a full-spectrum dominant strike force, built to blind, break, and bury any opposition in the air or on the ground. Every aircraft had its role. The F-35s flew point, soaking up terabytes of electronic data from Iranian radar emissions. These fifth-generation fighters acted as battlefield scouts, mapping threats and feeding targeting data to strike groups in real time. Meanwhile, F-22s, the stealthiest fighters in existence, flanked the B-2s like shadows, ensuring no Iranian jet could ever close in. Electronic warfare aircraft, likely EA-18G Growlers, disrupted and jammed enemy radar networks. Far overhead, E-3 Sentry and E-2D Hawkeye aircraft coordinated the entire operation, tracking everything from civilian aircraft to possible missile launches from within Iran. And then, the first wave hit. Not from the air, but from the sea. Deep beneath the Persian Gulf, a U.S. Navy nuclear-powered submarine launched dozens of cruise missiles toward key Iranian targets. These weren't speculative strikes, they were calculated. Radar installations, communication hubs, and mobile air defense systems were pounded by precise warheads delivered at supersonic speeds. It wasn't about overwhelming Iran's air defenses, it was about deleting them before they even powered up. As explosions rippled across Iran's radar grid, the air armada surged forward. Pilots inside Iranian air control centers saw their screens go black. Others saw false echoes or ghost images, the result of intense jamming. Communication between defense sectors became erratic or impossible. It was too late. The B-2s pushed deeper into Iranian airspace. At this point, no hostile radar could track them, and no surface-to-air missile had a lock. Those that tried were jammed, spoofed, or destroyed by the escort package before launch. The Iranian Air Force scrambled a few interceptors, mostly aging F-14s and MiG variants, but they never made it close. F-15s and F-18s loitered behind the strike package, ready to intercept. Most Iranian pilots never even saw what they were supposed to shoot down. From the outside, it looked like Iran simply stood down. But inside the military command centers, it was panic. Their most advanced Russian-supplied systems weren't reacting. GPS was degraded. Comms were patchy. The real horror wasn't what they could see, it was what they couldn't. And then came the final approach. The B-2s began splitting formation, each assigned to a target zone: Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan. These weren't bombing runs. They were executions. Every step, every altitude change, every second of approach had been rehearsed dozens of times before the mission ever launched. Iran's nuclear dreams were now seconds away from impact. As the clock struck 1840 hours Eastern Daylight Time, the first of 6 B-2 bombers opened its bomb bay doors over Iranian airspace. Below, buried deep within the Zagros Mountains, lay Fordow, the most heavily fortified nuclear site in the Islamic Republic's arsenal. For decades, it had been considered untouchable. That illusion was about to vanish in less than 60 seconds. Each B-2 released 2 GBU-57A-B Massive Ordnance Penetrators. These 30,000-pound weapons were not designed to explode on impact, they were designed to burrow. With over 5,000 pounds of high explosives encased in reinforced steel, each bomb used gravity, kinetic energy, and aerospace precision to dive through layers of concrete and granite. The real power of the MOP wasn't its explosion, it was its targeted violence, applied with surgical accuracy. Fordow wasn't just deep. It was deceptive. Its main centrifuge chamber, where uranium was being enriched, was protected by more than 260 feet, 79 meters, of solid rock. But this wasn't the bomber's only obstacle. The design of the facility included misleading architectural layouts, vent decoys, and curved tunnels to confuse any incoming ordnance. And yet, every bomb had a singular destination. High above, the B-2s released their payloads in staggered intervals, each bomb programmed to follow the one before it into the exact same impact point, a technique known as tandem penetration. The goal: use the first bomb to create the tunnel, and the second to finish the job. The B-2's precision guidance ensured a circular error probability of less than 10 meters. That meant each munition would hit within a few feet of its intended target, in this case, air vents that disguised the location of Iran's core nuclear infrastructure. At Natanz, another B-2 unleashed its deadly cargo. Though less deeply buried than Fordow, Natanz housed a broader network of facilities. Its destruction wasn't just about penetration, it was about sequenced detonation. Multiple strikes had to be timed perfectly to collapse interconnected buildings in unison, preventing emergency response teams from isolating damage or recovering equipment. Isfahan, a third key site, was hit by cruise missiles from the supporting submarine task force, leveling the surface infrastructure in seconds. The shockwaves from these strikes resonated through underground complexes, destabilizing foundations and severing energy and data lines. In orbit, U.S. military satellites captured infrared signatures that looked like controlled demolitions, bright, pinpoint flashes followed by rapid collapses. Escorting F-22s and F-35s, circling at a safe distance, reported seismic ripples and light blasts so intense that the night seemed to vanish for a moment. It wasn't just destruction. It was data. Each bomb carried onboard sensors to measure depth, delay, and structural resistance. These readings were streamed back to U.S. command in real time, giving analysts the most accurate battle damage assessment ever collected mid-mission. Iran's decades-long effort to harden its program beneath mountains and rock had failed. But while the structures may have been crushed, the world was left wondering, had the nuclear program itself been stopped? In the hours following the strike, satellite photos showed craters the size of houses, radiation sampling drones buzzed over target zones, and surface teams from Iran scrambled to access their shattered facilities. But one thing remained clear: no one, not even the attackers, could confirm how much damage had truly been done. The Fordow facility, buried beneath tons of rock and designed for survivability, was now sealed shut. The entrances had been buried in anticipation of a potential assault, and now they were choked with debris, making internal inspection nearly impossible without weeks of excavation. Tehran's own engineers, scientists, and military officials couldn't immediately assess whether their centrifuges had been obliterated or merely disabled. The world was watching, not just to see the damage, but to interpret Iran's response. The regime quickly released conflicting statements. Some officials claimed the facilities were untouched, their defenses successful. Others hinted at damage but framed it as superficial. These weren't just panicked reactions, they were calculated. By keeping the United States guessing, Iran maintained strategic ambiguity, denying Washington a clear public victory while hiding its own vulnerabilities. American officials, meanwhile, were cautious in their messaging. The White House issued a statement declaring the mission a success, emphasizing U.S. commitment to preventing nuclear proliferation. But behind closed doors, intelligence analysts at the DIA and CIA were far more reserved. With no boots on the ground and no direct evidence, there was no definitive confirmation that Iran's enrichment capability had been destroyed, only delayed. Months passed, and global nuclear watchdogs observed key signals: the absence of Iranian centrifuge activity, lack of enriched uranium output, and a noticeable cooling of Iran's rhetoric on nuclear development. Yet the ambiguity persisted. Iran didn't launch a full military retaliation. No ballistic missiles rained down on American bases in the region. Instead, Tehran turned to information warfare, media manipulation, cyber attacks, and proxy skirmishes designed to bleed slowly rather than strike back in full. The calculation was simple: avoid escalating into a war it couldn't win. Strategists in Beijing and Moscow, however, were the true secondary audience. The B-2 operation wasn't just about Iran, it was about sending a global message: the United States can still hit any target, anywhere, with overwhelming precision and no warning. It was a display of strength meant to deter China in the Pacific and warn Russia against overextending in Eastern Europe. But the question lingers: was this a knockout blow, or just a delay? Military analysts argue that nuclear infrastructure, while complex, is also rebuildable. Iran still possesses the knowledge, the engineers, and possibly even surviving centrifuge components hidden in backup sites. The US had struck hard, but perhaps not permanently. Still, one truth remains: the B-2 bombers did exactly what they were built to do. They traversed half the world, outsmarted the densest air defense networks, and struck the heart of a rogue nuclear program with unthinkable precision, all without being seen. Their mission will be studied for decades.